And now, the survival show that once survived a lengthy debate on gender-fluid Occupy. In this I2H Book Club episode, Zack Lynn stops by to discuss sailing in the zombie apocalypse and shenanigans. Howdy and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 216. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole. Safe and sound. Zack, welcome to In the Rabbit Hole.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor. I really enjoy your podcast.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate the good words. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun today because you have an interesting book. And you are the author of Undead Reckoning and the world champion title holder for most comical Amazon author bio. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you for the funny read. But before we dive into all that and get into your books, let's get to know you a little bit better, Zack. How did you get into preparedness?
Growing up, my family wasn't very prepared. And I guess back in '89 here on the West Coast, we had the earthquake, Loma Prieta earthquake. And that kind of was an eye-opener of how ill-prepared most of us are or were. And I think it took about 20 years for that to kind of sink in. And then I started to, just sort of follow the FEMA recommended, I think it is, 72-hour, kit for your car kind of thing. And so I got a bunch of stuff and built up my own emergency kit. A lot of fun building up your own emergency kit. Oh, yeah. Especially the first aid kit, the little tie suture thingies and all that kind of stuff. So that was a lot of fun, mountain house packets and little stoves and all that kind of stuff. And then after that, I guess it kind of sort of, snowballed a bit. I, said, well, water, we're going to be without water potentially. So, started getting some 55-gallon drums of water and tucking those away. Yeah, I think, that's sort of how I got into it anyway.
So you said 20 years. Was it like just this very slow thought in the back of your mind, I should really do something about this? Or was it just a collection of things that sort of woke you up over a long period of time?
I think it was just sort of percolating in the back of my mind. I started watching shows and reading books that were sort of the post-apocalyptic themes. I liked that genre. So, the more I read about that, the more I thought, there are some things that actually could happen. This is all really interesting fiction, but there are some things that could happen. And that sort of tied in with, we did have that big earthquake and, we'll probably due for another one before too long. And I think that just sort of, over time built up to the point where I decided, I should probably do something. So
what do you do during your day job? Are you an author full time?
No, I'm a software engineer. This was my first book. I've written most of my life, and I had a cool creative writing teacher that really inspired me to write and all that kind of stuff. So I try and infuse humor wherever possible, and I get good responses from friends, but that's friends. So so I wanted to see what it was like, to actually write a book. A buddy of mine wrote a couple mystery books, and so he and I were chatting, and I thought, I should just write something. So started writing. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So you said you write a little bit before that. Is it usually post-apocalyptic or dystopian fiction, or is it just a kind of runs the gamut of stuff?
Yeah, I think it runs the gamut. Mostly short stories and just sort of little essays or humorous pieces about daily life.
Huh, that's pretty interesting. I actually do kind of do that with, everybody keeps bugging me to one day I should write a book. And for years, I guess just having been in writing, I keep an Evernote file. And when something really funny and bizarre happens in life, I'll make a short little entry into this. And I'm like, one day that'll make it into a book if I ever get around to writing a book. So when you're working on writing, is there a favorite author that you try to model your writer's voice after, or that you model your writing after?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I appreciate Douglas Adams' ability to turn any sort of situation into the absurd. There's a little bit of that I guess I try and infuse into some of my writing.
In general, what's your favorite book?
Ooh, boy. I'm really into science fiction and fantasy. So Tolkien, was always big in my childhood. And later on, there's an author, R.A. Salvatore, does some really good work. Lately, I've been reading whatever I can get my hands on.
Mm-hmm.
I actually studied Shakespearean lit in college, along with a computer science degree.
There's an odd pairing.
Yeah, really, I'll read anything. I'm kind of a reading slut.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I am the same way. So what inspired you to write this book and with this specific subject matter? And I guess we'll walk into the book in a minute, but just what got you there? What started this process?
I was watching a lot of sort of dystopian, post-apocalyptic TV shows and movies. Sort of a trend at some point. I started watching Jericho and The Walking Dead. And The Walking Dead, I'll be honest, I was really taken to in that they didn't dwell on the, how did the zombie, apocalypse come about? That was just, boom, you're in this post-apocalyptic scenario, deal with it. And these were random people with problems, not perfect people trying to deal with the scenarios that they found themselves in. And that, to me, I found really enjoyable. And so I thought, what if my family had to survive, and, how would I do it? And what kinds of troubles and scenarios might I encounter? And then rather than just abstractly consider those things, I figured, why not write about it and figure it all out as I went? So I sort of sat down and said, I want this to be sort of like old-fashioned radio serial where, a scenario is presented at the end that's sort of a cliffhanger. And then next week, you got to figure out how to resolve it. And so I didn't do any planning ahead or trying to figure out, what the complete story would look like before I started writing. I just sat down and wrote. And every week I would write, one chapter and try and put my characters into scenarios that were difficult to deal with and see how they dealt with it. And I'd have the whole week to sort of consider, what would I do in that scenario? And then resolve it in the next one.
So you just let the words take you where they wanted to go. You didn't necessarily have this very scripted, outlined idea for what you were going to do.
That's an excellent way of putting it. That's exactly what I was doing.
It's a very fun, very intuitive way of writing. A lot of dystopian fiction and prepper authors in particular have skills and ideas and thoughts they want to share, and they wrap it into a story. Was yours more about, I've got this story, and then I'm going to mix the skills in as part of the way of telling the story? Which way did that shake out for you?
Well, central to the theme is, surviving an apocalyptic scenario at sea on a sailboat. Mm-hmm. I was into sailing at the time. I've always been into boating ever since I was a kid. And I had just sort of gotten into sailing, taken some sailing classes. And I thought, wow, this would be the perfect way to survive an apocalypse. So the more I thought about it, and the more I sort of started geeking out about equipment and the different kinds of boats and everything, that sort of appealed to me. And so I wanted to wrap that into the book. And at first, I didn't really think about making it about sailing your way around the apocalypse, but that's how it ended up being. And I think that desire to tell information about how boats can help. Why is a boat a good place to survive an apocalypse like this? I thought, that would be interesting to impart in the story. So that's kind of where I went with that.
Interesting. Okay. So walk us into the book. How does this start? And now for a quick break. Listeners, do you get at least $3 a month worth of value out of ITRH? We'd love to give you more. Visit itrh.net to find out about membership benefits. For starters, members get access to every episode ever produced and a monthly virtual conference. That's just for starters. And it's important to note, In the Rabbit Hole is supported nearly entirely by Roving Horde Armada members, just like you. That's how we pay the bills, stay on the air, keep the lights on around here. So go to itrh.net to learn how you can become part of the ITRH Roving Horde Armada. Next up, subscribe to the show through your favorite podcast app to make sure you never miss an episode by going to intherabbithole.com/iTunes or intherabbithole.com/Stitcher or intherabbithole.com/iHeartRadio or intherabbithole.com/Google Play. Or if you are one of those weirdos who listen to the show through YouTube, you can go to intherabbithole.com/YouTube because you know what? We support weirdos. However weird you want to be, we're all about that. Now, back to the show. Interesting. Okay. So walk us into the book. How does this start?
Yeah, there's a family in, our hero and his family live in Seattle, and the zombie apocalypse breaks out. And at first, they don't even realize it because Seattle has such a homeless problem, and people are always shambling around in the rain, not making eye contact anyway. So they don't even realize it's going on until it's already too late, basically.
I got you.
And at that point, they're thinking, let's flee. Let's go run in the car. And the son says, Dad, Highway 5 is like jam packed and there's smoke rising off of it. Now they have a boat, a power boat. And so they decide, well, let's go down to the harbor. Our friend has a sailboat down there. Let's go down to the harbor. Let's, see how things are. And so they head down to the harbor and someone has stolen their boat. So then they in turn have to, basically steal, a boat that they can take out as well. So their friend has his boat and they have this new boat for them, and away they go. Mm-hmm. From there, then it's a matter of, we weren't prepared for this. We each took a pack and, whatever we could put in it. And my wife took too much clothes and, my son took stuffies and, things like that. So, they have to sort of, figure out, well, what are we going to do is we don't have, food or fuel or anything. How do we deal with this? So they start to go on raids and, contact people that are surviving, and that list of people that are surviving are sort of dwindling as time goes by. So they need to deal with an ever increasing ratio of undead to live.
Mm-hmm. I got you. So I'm hung up on one thing here. So stuffies, like stuffies, like the son is a cross-dresser stuffies, like he stuffs them down his shirt stuffies, or is something totally different?
He's really young. We're talking like bears and dolphins and stuffies.
Okay. I'm sorry. I grew up in a very weird industry, so I know weird things about weird stuff, and they have weird names and
different kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was just like, that's an interesting story twist, but I don't know where you're going with this. All right. Stuffy, sure, kids. All right, everybody's gender fluid these days. I don't want to judge. It's cool. So
that's awesome.
So going through these things, I know you end up spending a lot of time, and I had to do this too, just doing this show. You spend a lot of time in your head and in sort of a very dark scenario and trying to work through things. And sometimes that can have an impact on the way you prepare, or maybe you see things in a new light. Did that happen for you? Did writing this book end up changing or amplifying the way you prep or how you prep or how much you prep? Or
one effect that it had is it took probably 3 years longer than I should have to sell my boat. so after it, I'm like, maybe we ought to hang on to that boat. You never know what might happen. Yeah, other than that, certainly I came up with a lot of plans of, if I ever do get a sailboat, how I would outfit that. I guess the only thing I did act on is being a little bit more comfortable and fluent with radios, particularly VHF and single sideband marine radios, because I think that's important in a scenario like that. And it certainly was to the characters as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned the sailboat. Did it impact your future plans? Like, I'm going to save up and get another boat, or
boats are expensive, man.
They are. Trust me, I know boats are expensive. That's an expensive hobby. Yeah.
My long-term plan, yes. My long-term plan is to get a catamaran, oddly enough, which is featured in the book. So, and it's funny because I didn't enter into the early chapters of the book having made a decision about, monohull versus catamaran kind of scenarios. I was still playing out all of the pluses and minuses of various kinds of sailboats. But I quickly gravitated towards a catamaran in the book. And for reasons that I think make a lot of sense in my life as well.
Well, lay it on me here. Don't tease me with details, because I went through the same thing, and it was like, monohull versus catamaran. It's catamaran's faster, but monohull's better, smoother ride, or whatever it was. This is interesting. Talk to me about that.
I think the biggie for me is no heeling. I don't have a problem with heeling, but my wife sure does. And there's a few times that we've been sailing, that's sort of a deal breaker from her point of view. I think also the more spread out room, I find myself, I'm pretty tall, and I find myself really sort of constrained in most monohull sailboats when I go down below. Whereas in a catamaran, down below isn't really down below until you go to sleep.
Right.
You have the family living area is much more like a living area, and it's much more open, and many more windows. All of those things, I think, in a survival scenario, it's really important that you have little creature comforts or things to raise morale. And to me, being shut up in the bottom of a monohull just didn't seem like that would have been good from my point of view. I also think that, and I probably will piss off some people here, but I also think the catamarans would survive hitting a floating container better than a monohull would. It's been said that catamarans are most stable upside down floating on the surface, whereas monohulls are most stable right side up at the bottom of the sea. And
I've heard that.
From my point of view, I'd rather be able to, sit on the bottom of my catamaran and weep rather than be drowned.
Yeah. So sailing does, it's a very interesting sort of bug out plan. It presents some interesting challenges, though. What challenges did you have to work through while crafting the story and working with sailing as the mode of bugging out?
I think from my point of view, the sailboat is actually, really ideal bug out scenario. Bugging out in a bunker always struck me as no fun at all. And, I'd rather have a platform that's mobile, but cars or even an RV, you're restricted to roads, and that seems like a recipe for disaster to me. I can sort of envision the ambushes and all kinds of scenarios that really don't play out well when you're restricted to a road and people can hear you coming. A boat, it's easier to get away from the troubles. You've got a whole two-dimensional plateau that you can play with, and you can sail around other people. And sailboats are slow, which is a little unfortunate, but in a grid down scenario, no need for fuel, and that's pretty darn cool. But I think the challenges are storage. It's really hard to get enough storage on a boat in general, and they're slow and they rely on wind or motoring. And with motoring, there you go, you're back with fuel. So I think those are sort of the pluses and minuses from my point of view of boats as a bug out.
Yeah. How do you work through that challenge of because I remember having to think that through too. How did you work through the challenges of storage? Did you just say, okay, we just have to be more careful, we have to be more self-sufficient? What? Yeah,
I think that one of the things is to consider the kinds of things that you bring on. So for example, on a sailboat, I would consider a water maker to be absolutely essential, because otherwise you have to sacrifice a huge amount of storage for water storage. And so a water maker is, an essential piece of kit for a boat. Fishing gear as well. The less food that you have to sort of, scavenge and, open up cans and that kind of stuff, the better off you are. Fishing gear takes up much less room than a whole massive number 10 cans of Mountain House or whatever. And, solar panels for electricity. Again, sailboats, but in particular catamarans have a lot of surface area that you can mount solar panels to. So that was another way to get around some of the limitations.
I gotcha. So do the zombies play? I mean, obviously they play a big part in the beginning of your book, but zombies in general, in most zombie stories that I've enjoyed or even read, because there's been some I didn't enjoy. What do the zombies swim in yours? Like, how do they play such a pivotal role if most of after the initial part they're on the water?
Yep, they don't swim. They bob and sort of randomly flail, which can be dangerous, but not very. But the truth of the matter is that in the beginning here, the crew didn't have anything really to speak of for them to be prepared. So they needed things like, we got to go get some fishing gear. We got to go, get some ammo for shotguns. We have to, get some canned goods, some medical supplies, all that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of runs to land-based establishments to try and, get stuff. They were also are pursued in one scenario, and they also, in another scenario, need to rescue some people because they're good-hearted people at the core and not incredibly selfish. And they find some people in distress, a damsel in distress in particular.
Oh, I love a good damsel in distress.
Of course, we all do. And so they decided to take care of that. That has to do with a ferry, by the way, and that's ferry, Ferry, ferry on up in Anacortes area. So I think that there are quite a few times when sure, you could just sail around forever, but you probably want to cook on a fire, so you need to go on land to do that. And they actually found a little island that they could camp on and tie up to, that served some of that purpose. And it was zombie free, and it actually had some raccoons and some deer that they could hunt and things like that. But they still found themselves needing to go back to populous areas to scavenge.
So they're forced back into dealing with the zombies.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And of course, that's where the fun, comes in.
Well,
from otherwise they'd just be derping around on the ocean the whole time, and that's not fun for anybody.
You're like, well, this turned into a boring book to write.
Yeah, right.
Too
Chapter
funny.
3, I'm done.
And we sailed for 7 more chapters. That was about it. That kind of brings me to the next thing. So what is your prepper pet peeve? Like, what in the industry or the genre, anywhere in there, books, other things, whatever, where's your pet peeve? Like, what drives you nuts? Like, what thing, like every time you hear it, you're like, oh my God, that's so stupid.
I think the idea that people have that they can just sort of bug in their house, and survive sort of indefinitely. I think that always struck me as a little absurd. I think that's probably my pet peeve.
Okay. What is your most important and precious piece of prepper gear?
So that for me is actually not gear, it's training.
Good one.
To me, the best money that I've ever spent has been training. Medical training is hugely useful for state and CPR. I'm planning on doing some tactical medical stuff soon. There's a guy in the area that does some tactical medical training. I think he even goes all the way to practicing suturing, which I think should be cool.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Hardly anyone teaches that anymore.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So now you kind of jacked my $100 question. So I have to ask it anyway and just answer it all over again, which is, what is the best $100 you've ever spent in prep?
Well, yeah, that would be training. But if I had to pick a thing, it would probably be water related. So I would say water filtering gear is probably my favorite under $100 prep.
Gotcha. So what is the go-to rifle of the main character in your book?
Shotgun. It's the most versatile weapon from their point of view. The versatile ammo, the birdshot and slug, salt, or bean bags if you go for that. But I think, by far it's one of the most versatile weapons. You can, if you're not in too constrained of a scenario physically, then you can use it in place of a pistol for self-defense. But you can also use it for hunting. And so from my point of view, one gun, it would be a shotgun.
Okay, cool. Someone goes and gets your book. They think, this is great. I want to follow this guy. I want to see if he writes another zombie book or just another book in general. What is the best way for people to connect with you and keep up with your words?
I have my own website, zacklynn.com. That's ZACKLYNN.com, And on there it has my bio, and it has, the books that I've written, which is book right now, and how to get in touch with me, those kinds of things. And I've I have been very, good at keeping up on a blog, but I have some blog entries on there anyway. That's probably the best way. It has links to the Amazon Kindle and iBooks sites for purchasing either the EPUB, or on Amazon you can get a printed copy as well.
Oh, very cool. So what is that website address one more time?
ZackLynn.com. And you don't need the www, but you can put it there if you like. www.zacklynn.com. ZackLynn.
Awesome. Zack, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to check out your book as soon as I get a free minute here.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. I really appreciate the time.
Countdown to the season ends. The last episode of this season will be May 1st. ITRH will return from summer break August 7th, 2017. And you will, of course, get your annual ITRH summer shorts to tide you over while we're away. And that'll be about every 3 weeks during the summer. Again, we will return August 7th. Show notes, resources, and links to Zack can be found by going to intherabbithole.com/E216. Support the show by going to itrh.net and becoming part of the Roving Horde Armada. In the Rabbit Hole is supported nearly entirely by listeners just like you. Seriously, that's how we keep the lights on around here. Visit itrh.net to support the show and get members-only benefits. With that, we wrap up episode number 216. From the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.